30-year-old Canadian Sonia Herok-Stone was brutally murdered in Carmel, California. Her daughter was just 4 years old.
I was at preschool. There was 2 officers, and they sat me down and told me that my mom had been killed.
Sasha, who lives in Vancouver, is now 46.
I looked identical to her for many years, which really caught people off guard. So when they saw me, it was like she was still alive.
Sasha has spent her life seeking justice for her mother's death.
I just kind of felt for years like she was forgotten. And it's not this way, but it sort of felt like she wasn't American, and so the case didn't get reopened or something. And it just felt like years of no one remembering or caring.
When she was a teenager, Sasha's aunt gave her this, a list of people who had investigated her mother's murder, and she mentioned the name Detective Dorman.
She said, if the case ever reopens, hang on to this. And as many times as I've moved and as many things as I've lost, I had this couple pieces of yellow paper.
And in 1995, when Sasha was 18,
I marched into Detective Dorman's office.
I didn't recognize her because the last time I saw her, she was 4, and she was quite angry about the fact that her mother's case had been unresolved.
From what I had heard, people were so sure that this person did it. Why has it not been reopened?
This person is Michael Glazebrook, who by this time is divorced and the father of an 11-year-old boy.
I remember looking up in the phone book Glazebrook's phone number and being such in disbelief that he was free and phoning him on the telephone. I didn't talk to him. He answered and I hung up the phone.
Despite Sasha's plea for the case to be reopened, the file collects dust for another 13 years. In 2009, a new detective begins looking into the cold case, but it doesn't go anywhere. There have been huge advances in DNA, but the department doesn't have the funding or the manpower to fully investigate the crime.
It's frustrating. You never give up hope, but you just have to, make peace with it.
And then July 2020, 39 years after Sonia was murdered.
I created my cold case task force
The Monterey County District Attorney launches a new initiative
to work exclusively on qualified cold cases, as well as pursue advanced DNA testing.
A new detective is put in charge of reviewing Sonia Herok-Stone's murder.
I went through the evidence we had available to us, and I agreed that the case was still very solvable.
Detective Arras Wilson feels an immediate kinship with Sonia's daughter, Sasha.
I noticed that she and I are only a few months apart in age. And it caused me to think to myself, what would my life have been like if my mother was killed when I was only 4 years old? It really drove me and pushed me to figure out exactly what happened and solve this case once and for all.
One of his first steps, reaching out to the original detective, the now retired Linz Dorman.
I noticed early on that he was pursuing this case ruthlessly. Every lead that he could find, he was digging into.
He's kind of amazed that I remembered it so well, but the reason I remembered it so well is I carried it with me, inside me, all these years.
Detective Wilson has something that Linz Dorman did not when he was investigating the case back in the 1980s, DNA testing.
In 1981, forensics were limited to blood typing. There was no known way to make an identification through DNA.
In Sonia's fight for her life, she had scratched her killer so hard that her fingernail broke.
There was blood underneath her fingernail, and it was suspected that the blood underneath that fingernail could have been from the scratch on Glazebrook's face.
With advancements in DNA technology, it should be an easy analysis. It isn't. Believe it or not, Glazebrook's original blood sample accidentally got destroyed.
Shortly after the homicide occurred, a sample of Michael Glazebrook's blood was collected as evidence. And at some point over the years, that blood vial broke.
Key evidence that could prove Glazebrook committed the crime, gone, unusable. And so Detective Wilson sets out to get a new sample.
So I wrote a search warrant that authorized me to collect a clean, fresh sample of Glazebrook's DNA.
By now, Glazebrook is in his 60s and leading a full life in his parents' home, just 20 minutes from the murder scene. He's a Little League umpire and coach and works as a bus driver for a local school. Now divorced, he's a father and a grandfather.
We simply parked near his residence and pulled him over one day.
We're at Waring and Hilby, pulling over Gray Sonic.
W5 has obtained the police recording of the exchange between Detective Wilson and Michael Glazebrook. You can hear the detective walking up to his car.
Hey boss, how's it going? Mr. Glazebrook, right? Hey, I'm Detective Wilson in the Sheriff's Office. Can you turn your car off? I picked up the case of Sonia Stone, the cold case homicide that we've been working forever. And so I have a search warrant for your DNA.
You have time for me to check with my lawyer?
No.
This is the first time we're hearing Michael Glazebrook's voice.
There's no right to talk to an attorney first. It's the way the search warrant is for. Well, this is your copy.
I'm on my way to work, so.
Okay.
Glazebrook is led to the detective's car so the inside of his cheeks can be swabbed to collect his DNA.
You just put it on the inside of your cheek and just rub it up and down. We'll do one side of the cheek and then the other. Alrighty. Okay, so that's it. You're free to go, but I would like to ask you, who do you think we should be looking at? Who do you think did it?
Just from talking to my lawyer and him talking to family members, I know the daughter seems to think her dad did it.
Oh, really?
I was told during that whole process, and this is kind of what's allowed me to move on from it, is they knew who did it, but they couldn't prosecute him because they already had me set up in the system.
All these years later, Glazebrook tries to revive the unfounded rumor that Michael Stone is the killer. And then Detective Wilson asks what appears to be an innocent question.
So did you even know her at all?
No.
Okay.
Never even met her.
A major change to his story. The man who once claimed to be having an affair with Sonia now says he didn't even know her.
I happened to live across the street.
And that was it?
That was it. But if you guys want to sit down and talk, give me a holler.
Okay.
I mean, I got to get to work.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I really appreciate it. And we want to clear the people who didn't do it. Right? And catch the person who did.
Glazebrook's new DNA sample is sent to this lab in Northern California.
The advancements in DNA have been tremendous. I mean, leaps and bounds from 1981 to now. Essentially, it's like going from a Ford Model A to a Ferrari.
Josh Sahat is a forensics expert at the California Department of Justice. In the lab, he compared Glazebrook's DNA with the DNA found under Sonia's fingernail.
The chance that you could go out randomly into the population and pick somebody and have that person's profile match the profile underneath the fingernails was like 1 in 46 quadrillion.
A 1 in 46 quadrillion chance that it is not Michael Glazebrook. To put that in perspective, 1 quadrillion is 1 million billion. There are only 8 billion people on Earth. In other words, a bullseye.
It creates a huge amount of evidence that proves the only killer and the real killer was Michael Glazebrook.
Matt LaRoe is the prosecutor assigned to the case.
I've always wanted to work cold cases. I think they're the ultimate mysteries.
With the DNA match, prosecutor LaRoe knows this ultimate mystery is one big step closer to being solved. And then, a crushing blow. Remember how the vial of Glazebrook's blood had broken sometime over the previous 4 decades? Well, it turns out it had spilled onto the envelope where Sonia's fingernail was stored.
We had to consult with the criminalists and the scientists and make sure that we were positive that the DNA result we got was not the result of contamination.
Detective Wilson shows us the evidence that was tested.
It was a highly sensitive test that picks up even the slightest trace of blood.
The outside of the envelope stained with Glazebrook's blood, and the packet inside the envelope that stored Sonia's fingernail.
The fingernail clippings themselves were actually stored in a wax paper spindle, and it was determined that there was no blood whatsoever on the outside or the inside of this packaging.
No possible contamination. But they know at trial the defense will raise doubts, and so it becomes vital to find another sample of Glazebrook's DNA on Sonia's body.
There had to be something out there. I knew that the swabs that were taken in the sexual assault kit could provide critical additional evidence in this case.
But by now, this case is feeling cursed. Because even though they have these records that a sexual assault kit was done, the evidence can't be found.
We don't know who lost it. We don't know when it was last in evidence, but that was a devastating blow.
Somebody's got to look into this. You can't just lose a piece of evidence. That just doesn't happen. It didn't get up and walk off.
Detective Wilson begins the painstaking process of trying to track down the kit.
I had a strong gut feeling that there was some lab, someplace, somewhere out there that still had evidence in this case that could be found.
He calls labs across the state, and after months, eventually hits the jackpot. One lab had, tucked away in storage, swab samples that were taken from Sonia's breast. Samples that had been perfectly preserved in glass microscope slides.
Eliminated any chance of those slides being contaminated over the course of 40 years.
The right breast swab slide came into our laboratory, and I was able to generate that DNA profile, which was consistent with Mr. Glazebrook's profile.
Another hit. Investigators now have 2 samples of Glazebrook's DNA from Sonia's body, from the swab of her right breast and from under her fingernail.
That extra sample, I think, was the game changer in this case.
It felt like we struck gold. It really cracked the case, and it was the last thing that we needed to be able to prove to a jury beyond any reasonable doubt that Michael Glazebrook was the killer.
The phone rings at 10 p.m. and I'm about to go to bed. And I see that it's Officer Wilson. And so I answer the phone, and they have me on speaker, and it's the entire sheriff's department or team. They tell me that they were able to make the arrest and that they all wore Levi jeans in honor of my mom, which was pretty awesome.
She was crying so hard it was hard for her to speak. She was extremely happy because I think she got to the point in her life where she just accepted the fact that this case would never be solved.
Just to finally have the complete, without a shadow of a doubt, scientific proof that this is the man who did it was huge relief.
Coming up.
The defendant in a 1980s murder trial is now back in jail tonight.
Will justice finally be served?
The defense argued that the DNA had been contaminated.
When W5 continues.
The once muscle-bound 25-year-old Michael Glazebrook is now 67 years old. He is, for the second time, charged for the murder of Sonia Herok-Stone.
The defendant in a 1980s murder trial is now back in jail tonight.
Double jeopardy is not a factor. He can be charged twice for the same crime because there was no verdict in the first case back in 1983. His plea, again, not guilty, and again, he is granted bail. January 2023. The trial and the ensuing court battle begins. Prosecutor Matt Leroux walks into court knowing anything can happen.
This case was a minefield, and one step in the wrong direction at any given point in time could have been fatal to the case. I was holding my breath.
Some of Sonia's family members are here, including her brother, Eric.
I thank God this day has come. I gave up on answers. I gave up on everything. This has been going on for 40 years.
And former husband, Michael Stone.
It's been difficult for 41 years, especially having been a suspect, and to see my daughter going through so much for so long. Yeah, it's been a lot, and it feels like it's getting close to closure finally.
Over the 8-day trial, Prosecutor Leroux presents evidence and calls witnesses.
The defense obviously argued that the DNA had been contaminated. They presented former testimony from his parents that he didn't have a scratch on his face the day of the murder, and his father indicated that he had been with him shortly after the murder happened. So it was an alibi defense of sorts.
And after our team took a week, they take a day and they have nothing, like no defense. And then they turn to Glazebrook and say, does he want to take the stand? And he decides not to take the stand. And then they say, we're done. And we're like, what?
The case is now in the hands of the jury.
I'm always nervous when I'm waiting for a jury verdict. It's the worst feeling in the world for me personally.
After just 1 day of deliberating, the jury returns.
In that moment, I remember just saying, God, this is you. Whatever you want this verdict to be, I'm just trusting that you have got this, either way.
The verdict is read out, guilty of first-degree murder.
So much relief. Just so much gratitude.
But it still isn't over. Glazebrook's lawyers take one last stab at having the case thrown out, based on the length of time it took to try him for the crime.
Too much time has passed for him to be able to mount an effective defense at trial.
But the judge disagrees. In this transcript of her reasoning, she states, there is absolutely no evidence of any intentional delay. The motion is respectfully denied. A few months later, with Michael Glazebrook looking on in an orange and white prison uniform, Judge Pamela Butler delivers her sentence.
I do think Sonia would be very proud of her daughter for who she's become. And that's all a mother can hope for. With that, Mr. Glazebrook, you are committed to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation for life without possibility of parole.
Michael Glazebrook, sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
He hasn't confessed. He has no remorse. I'm glad he got life in prison.
For a family torn apart by their loss, torn apart by accusations and suspicions.
I'm gonna apologize to this man here. That's about it.
Reconciliation between Sonia's brother and her former husband, who for years has lived under a cloud of suspicion.
Especially have Eric here, Sonia's brother. I was really deeply touched by his statement. You know, he's had a lot of anger towards me, so there's a healing there between us too, which is really nice.
Well, I think congratulations are in order.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, 42 years.
Yeah.
The two police officers, old and new, celebrate.
I'm probably old enough to be your father. I know what you're doing, and you know what I did, and
Right.
I'm just glad it was never forgotten and that you took over.
Oh, nobody forgot about Sonia, and eventually we got to the finish line on this case, and we got it solved.
To justice for Sonia. Cheers. Her ashes are in the ocean, so it's just a little thing that I do, and just sit down, have a little chat, and just remember her and keep her alive.
Sasha Stone has become an advocate for victims' rights. To learn more about her mission, go to our website, w5.ctvnews.ca.